Assalamu alaikum, respected scholars, brothers and sisters. Congratulations to all of humanity on the celebration of the birthday of the personification of light, the warner of mankind, and the servant of God, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the heart of the parent as a source of love for their children. It is within the fitrah of the parent to love his or her child, and God has extended his wilayah through parents in order to guide their believing children. Islam has provided a blueprint for both parents and children from birth up to the age of 21 to help mold the child into a believer whose compass always points back towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said to Imam Ali alayhi salam that, "O Ali, there are as many rights of children incumbent on parents as there are rights of parents incumbent upon children." When we speak of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we must ask ourselves, how did the infant who parted from his family at birth grow up to redefine the entire concept of family and tribe into something far larger, the ummah, the people or the community of Islam? More importantly, how did our beloved Prophet, peace be and blessings be upon him, who grew up as an orphan, with his father Abdullah passing away a few days before his birth, and his mother Amina passing away a few years later, come to be the perfect example of fatherhood? How did he become an entire map for parenthood and raising the children that God has entrusted to us in this life? There are infinite dimensions to Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him, and his life can be examined from a political, a social, and a spiritual lens. But today I want to touch briefly on his wisdom as a father, a grandfather, a nurturer, a man who showed us that despite the hardships of our own upbringing, we have the ability to become excellent parents to our children. He is the ultimate example to look towards when trying to reach perfection when dealing with our family members. For he is the one who raised the lady of all the worlds, the epitome of womanhood, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. Today, the upbringing of children is one of the most important elements for the happiness of humanity, to the point where scientists have written many books on child psychology. Perhaps this vast amount of information on parenting didn't exist in our parents' time or even our grandparents' time. But 14 centuries ago, when people were engulfed in the age of darkness and ignorance, the great leader of Islam paid full attention to the value and importance of a children's upbringing, providing all of us the necessary teachings to raise physically, emotionally, and spiritually rich children. Since we have limited time today, I want to focus on one of my favorite hadiths by Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him, on the upbringing of children. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in Mizan al-Hikmah, hadith number 509, is reported to say that a child is a master for 7 years. He is a slave for the next 7 years, and he is an advisor for another 7 years. By the age of 21, you as a parent must approve of his manners or cut him loose, for by then you would have fulfilled your obligation towards Allah the Most High. This is one of the most beautiful parenting advices given to us by Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him. And as a parent, this hadith has genuine, practical wisdom behind it. Because what does it mean? When the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says, firstly, a child is a master for 7 years, who is the child a master of? He is the master of his parents. And any of you with young children or with small nieces and nephews will attest to this. That small child, 2, 3, 4 years old, is your master. Why? The Prophet says that these years from birth to the age of 7 are years where the child is learning through play. Developmentally, they are changing so much, so fast, and really, they are in control and we are simply adapting to meet their needs. Therefore, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, tells us that the child is a master. She guides and we follow. He shows us the importance of play, love, affection, and attention in the first 7 years of childhood, coupled with light guidance and modeling of Islamic values and behaviors by the parent, so the child can absorb all these habits. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, then goes on to say, for the second stage, the second part of the hadith, from ages 8 to 14, the child is a slave. The choice of the word slave here is in the sense that the child must now follow the instructions of their parents and teachers. This is because the child's mind can now grasp the logical reasoning and can now understand proper Islamic ethics. This is the age where the child is ready for formal discipline. It is at this age that the parents must guide the learning of the child. And with this formal training, however, we must not lose the softness in our hearts towards our children. Sometimes we become so focused on discipline, on training, on academics, on competition, that we forget that our children are believers. Their hearts are entrusted to us by God. They do not belong to us. We must not break their hearts in the process of trying to train them. They still need love, validation, and emotional support. There's a hadith that shows this beautifully. It says the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, came and he kissed Imam Hussain and Imam Hussain alayhi salam. A man observed this and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have 10 children, but I've never kissed any of them. The Prophet turned to him and he said, what can I do when God has taken his mercy out of your heart? This is our Prophet. In a time where children were not given the status that God had granted them, he brought love and life back to parenting. Next, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, speaks of the third stage of raising a child from the age of 15 to 21. He says, for the next 7 years now, the child is an advisor. At the age of 14 and up, the Muslim child is expected to have become a God-conscious teenager. Therefore, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that the parent should now treat him or her more like a friend than a slave. And at this stage then, the parents should guide and help their teenage child in making the correct decisions for themselves. And as a teen, the child has had to start training for their worldly and spiritual success, and they're nearing the age of marriage, so the child should be comfortable in confiding in their parents, and there should be open communication between the two. Therefore, it's more like a relationship where the parent consults the child and allows them to provide their insight, but is still the main source of guidance. Finally, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says the age of 21 comes, the parent's responsibility towards their children comes to an end. And if anyone brings up his children based on Islamic values, that child surely will be an individual who is the light of their parents' eyes, and the child may be hoped to fulfill her obligations towards her parents. So we have this beautiful hadith as a guide for bringing up the next generation. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, a virtuous child is a flower from the flowers of paradise. And as his grandsons, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi salam, would run towards him, he would say, these two are my sweet-smelling flowers in this world. This was our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. A man who not only conveyed us the religion of Islam, but provided us with the ultimate guide and example for raising our children. And so today, as we celebrate the many dimensions of the Prophet of God, let us remember him as a map for parenthood. Let us make dua and illuminate our hearts and intentions with the nur of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let us soften our hearts when we deal with our children and follow his guidelines to raise the next generation of supporters in the army of Imam al-Zaman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten his dear parents. A heartfelt thank you for the Dallas Youth Committee for having me today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase the reward for your efforts with a loud salawat Muhammadan wa ali Muhammad.